Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
I am sad we couldn't make it to the outdoor game this year. Like, we really wanted to, but I have to say, watching how that game ended, I know there would have been a progressive amount of anger, and it probably would have gone Brad and then me and then Evan the most angry if we had to sit through that biting, freezing cold just for a referee ending. And I'm not trying to sit here and complain about the refs the whole episode, because there's a lot that went into that Red Wings loss, but that kind of ending to the game, and it's also freezing temps.
I already told you I'm not going to an outdoor game unless if it's minus 20 in Columbus last night, it's better be plus 20 at the one I'm going to. There's no way I'm sitting through a cold. After the Big House, I'm never doing that again. It was a great experience. Enjoyed my time. Well, somewhat enjoyed my time. But
Type 2 fun.
I'm Florida outdoor games, sign me up.
Well, next year.
Perfect.
You'll have to buy the box then. And it's Ohio, so you could have afforded the box quite easily.
Yeah. Well, they got a good turnout.
90,000. Really impressive.
Yeah.
And they all have to sit there and wait for 30 minutes because there's a basketball game going on in Tennessee.
Wow.
All right. Not the episode we want to be recording. Evan, I'll tell you, we didn't proclaim playoffs last episode without you. I was trying to goad Brad into doing it, but he refused.
I saw some rumblings on the internet that neither of you two are allowed to do an episode by yourselves ever again.
Well, that's just a curse on you. I don't know what you did to piss those people off.
It might be my fault, but it's also both of your fault.
Fair enough. We share the blame. Folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
I want you all to know Brad is fighting for his life right now. There may be some pauses and edits in this episode. You might run out of the room. On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking about Detroit's 2 regulation losses, one inside, one outside, both to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Takeaways from those games, mostly bad, whatever positives there are in there, and then how this affects Detroit's playoff push going forward, where they are in the standings, what they have ahead, and more. And then the trade deadline. What does this mean for Steve Yzerman and the Detroit Red Wings? Is this being compared to games of old against the Ottawa Senators, or is this different? We're going to be talking about a positive story, which is that the Red Wings offense is largely being carried by Alex Debrincat in the season he's having. So we'll take a look at that. Whatever else comes up with the Red Wings, and then NHL news from across the league headlined by trades. Seth Jones is indeed going to the Florida Panthers in the return, and the retention is interesting. Players who are available across the league and more before overtime. Before all that, I think there are a handful, maybe 10 or 15 tickets left to Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA. Saturday, March 29th, go to wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings to get your tickets. Your tickets give you access to the Red Wings game at a discounted rate, to the pregame live recording of the Winged Wheel Podcast at Little Caesars Arena, featuring Ken Daniels and us, the lowly hosts of the Winged Wheel Podcast. You get a Detroit Red Wings and Winged Wheel Podcast co-branded barber pole style jersey and plenty more. Again, wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings. Also, very quickly, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. Tons of benefits. We'll talk about them later. Let's jump right into the hockey right now, though. Before these 2 games, Brad and I talked last episode and said there are no results that could happen that would eliminate Detroit from playoff contention, technically speaking. And there are very few ways things could happen where, emotionally speaking, it would eliminate Detroit. And I still maintain that despite how bad these 2 losses were, this doesn't feel to me like the 2 Ottawa Senators losses from a couple of years ago. And Detroit's certainly not out of it. They're still actually in a wild card playoff spot right now. Ottawa has a game in hand and they have the tiebreaker, so we'll see how long that lasts. But Detroit is still in position to make a run of this. But the worst possible outcome happened. 2 regulation losses. And I have to say the February 27th loss, the one that was in Detroit indoors, that was one of the worst games of the year for the Red Wings.
I know you said you can't draw too many parallels to the Ottawa games of a couple years ago.
I personally can't. I'm happy to argue.
There's enough there that makes you wonder, just because of specifically the first game, how bad it was. Like, that was the thing with Ottawa. They didn't just lose those two games, they got killed. That Thursday night game gave me a big moment of, history is repeating itself. Obviously, they had a much better effort on Saturday, but there was a 48-hour window where I think I probably wasn't the only one about ready to hit a panic switch after that game.
The first game opened with Alex Debrincat scoring, continuing his point streak. That brought it to 8 games at the time. His 27th goal of the year, it was from JT Compher, and then 4 unanswered goals for the Columbus Blue Jackets. For a brief moment in time, we thought the Red Wings might have life as JT Compher, combined with Jonathan Bergeron, got on the board to make it 4-2 on the power play very quickly, but it just never came close after that. The whole game was just sloppy. It was probably, as far as Larkin's career outside of his initial becomings of a Red Wing as a rookie went, one of the worst games of his career. I think, he doesn't have a lot of juice right now. Just seems exhausted. I know that's been talked about. I wonder if he's nursing something too. But even if you look at Todd McLellan's comments after the game, like, he's like, Dylan's a big boy. He can handle, hearing some constructive criticism. And that was, he needs to be better. He needs to show up. He's, double clutching, messing things up that he usually gets right. That was probably the most forgettable performance of Larkin's recent career, at the very least.
The last person I'm concerned about on the Detroit Red Wings is Dylan Larkin. Did he have a stinker? Absolutely. Will he figure it out? Also, absolutely. Like, full faith in him to get it figured out. Happened at the worst possible time of the season, unfortunately, but those things happen. There's still lots of games left in the season for him to right the ship and help the team continue in the playoff push.
It shows the appetite for the fans for the playoffs. Like, ever since Detroit started sniffing even the sense of a wild card spot over the last couple of years, it just brought about a new set of expectations for the team. And I'm very much in favor of that. I think people should absolutely expect the most out of their hockey team. They pay good money for the tickets and they don't go there to watch a rebuild for 10 years, like, at some point you got to turn the page. But when the chorus of, this is Larkin letting us down yet again, or Larkin isn't up to the task, or, Larkin's the big problem. He was a problem in that game. One of the biggest ones for sure. But I agree. Over the course of a season, you're not worried about this continuing for Dylan Larkin. It's notable because it was bad. How many Red Wings have bad games constantly?
How many Red Wings tenures have just been bad in general?
An amount so high that we usually get yelled at when we talk about it too much. Anyways, the long and short of it is that the Red Wings lose that game 5-2, a bad effort overall, and one that the Red Wings knew they needed to move on from. And not a good one from Cam Talbot either, I'll say. Not a strong performance from him. The goaltending recently has actually been, aside from a few moments here and there, quite a bit of a letdown. And so Detroit's down, 1 in this back-to-back of Red Wings versus Blue Jackets heading into the outdoor game. And a 5-3 finish to that one, but not the same story at all. There's a lot that went into this game. Actually, let's first talk about the outdoor game itself, the Stadium Series game in Ohio. Aside from the fact that it was in Ohio, what did Larkin say? He was like, it's the ugliest stadium I've ever been in, or something like that.
Yeah.
As he should, as a captain of the Red Wings and a Michigan alum. I love both teams' walk-ins, though. They're homages to Johnny Gaudreau and wearing Gaudreau's jerseys from over the years for the Red Wings, and then the Blue Jackets walking in with their classic Johnny look. That was a classy touch, I felt.
Yep.
The other story from the pregame is that a lot of people didn't see the pregame. Stadium Series aren't the Winter Classic, and the Winter Classic has a hard enough time being advertised on its own, so the Stadium Series especially suffers. But this Stadium Series felt like it had a lot of attention, a lot of hype. It was a really cool, unique first-time hockey venue. It was an Original Six team, and then one of the most promising stories in the NHL this year, a team that shouldn't be this good with a really powerful story and motivation behind them. A lot of eyes on it, and because of broadcasting rights and rules and the bigger audience, whatever it is, a 5 or 6 seed NCAA, and that's not a slight, like important game, NCAA basketball game goes longer than the allotted time, and they delay puck drop by, 35 minutes? And no one could watch the pregame ceremonies. No one could watch a lot of those, the fanfare that went around making the stadium series and the outdoor game what it was, depending on what access you had to whatever network. Sure, maybe depending on where you were, but a lot of people were like, I have ESPN Plus or whatever you need, can't get this. Classic example of the NHL. Like, I know there's so many things out of their hands, and there's so many things out of, the broadcast crew's hands and whatever, but it's just designed in such a way where if this can happen.
If you only have one point of fault that everything breaks down at that, it's a bad plan. The NHL and ESPN should have had a contingency should this happens. They're looking through this. They're looking at building out the schedule amongst all the other things that these venues have going on. The TV structuring and the TV scheduling should also be involved in that. It can't happen for an outdoor game.
And I know NCAA basketball has no reason to care about an NHL game in terms of scheduling, but I heard a lot of, these games are only booked for 2 hours, but they haven't been 2-hour ordeals, especially when they're big games in a long time, where they often run over. And if you're the broadcaster, figure it out in advance. It can't have been news to you.
Yeah.
Anyways, frustrating thing, especially when like the visuals for this game were awesome. Like, people want to see it. People want to see all the shots of the 90,000 fans flooding into the stadium. They want to see all the shots of the clean as hell looking uniforms in the entire setup for both teams. I thought they look so nice out there. Think what you want about the small details like the helmet wings and things like that. I just thought it looked crisp as hell. People couldn't really watch it.
Yeah, it was a great setup. And with the outdoor games, I think everybody's come to realize over time, it's for the locals. It's not for TV, right? Like, obviously, Blue Jacket fans were hyped up. Red Wings fans were hyped up. The geographic distance between them made it very appreciable for both teams. But still, like, if you're the NHL, you have, like, you laid out all the great points with Columbus being such a great underdog story with the Gaudreau story behind it. But then also an original 6 team who hasn't made the playoffs in nearly a decade, who's right in the heat of it with this team, with the Blue Jackets. Even if this wasn't an outdoor game, this should be a high priority game for the NHL if it's a nationally televised game. So yeah, the fact they didn't have a contingency plan, the fact that it just shows how unserious some of these rights holders are about the NHL. And I understand you can only get what you can get, but it's frustrating.
There's also, think what you want about the broadcast, but in my mind, if you're going to you shouldn't be doing in-game interviews at all. Maybe I'm old school about it. I just don't think anyone wants that.
What unique information are you going to gather from either the players, the coaches, or other celebrity types who might be at the event?
And if you're going to do an in-game, like, I fully agree. You're not going to get anything. Coaches, you can hear them. They're just trying to rush through this so they can get back to coaching the hockey game.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to hear from John Tortorella. Fine.
I'm sure he loves doing that.
But for people not even actively participating in the game, who wants to watch that? And then if you must do it, don't do it. Do it during your long intermissions. Don't do it as play is going on. And then don't make it picture in picture. Make it just the audio. And then don't do it at the start of a power play.
There's certainly a lot of takeaways from this event that hopefully, and I'm not holding my breath on this, that hopefully they resolve going forward, because at the end of the day, if you have a bad TV product like yesterday was, people are just going to tune out and watch something else.
Yeah. All right, getting back to the actual game, the first period ends up scoreless, and in the second period, the Red Wings go down 1-0 at the hands of Denton Matejchuk, who smartly waits with the puck, fires it home, his third of the season. Columbus up 1-0. Not long after that, about 8 minutes later, Alex Debrincat on the power play, his 28th of the year. It's from Patrick Kane. Mo Seider on the secondary assist. That was the power play goal that happened picture in picture. And Debrincat just can't stop scoring right now. When everything looks lowly and the Red Wings need a spark, or even if they're buzzing, like, he is usually the one lately to break through and has himself on a nice goal pace here. And then the Red Wings give up 2 quick goals to end the second period. And I don't want to say they weren't being dominated at that point. I don't think Columbus had them on their heels or anything. I think this game was a much better effort, as Brad said, than the first game. But Dmitry Voronkov on the power play makes it 2-1. Okay, whatever. The PK was having a hard time again. Matthew Olivier comes out from behind the net 32 seconds later and scores a goal. It was a failed Gustafsson clear. Just did a terrible job with it. Puck got blocked. Puck stayed down low. Olivier comes out in front, and I that one should not have beat Talbot. I'm sorry. I've been a big fan of Talbot this season. I think he's been the better goalie for the Red Wings this season. That one should not have gone in. And frankly, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but the Danforth goal, number 4, for all the drama that was that goal too, and the missed call, I don't think that one should have gone in either. So just that stretch, 2-1, then 3-1, was terrible for Detroit. Thankfully, they did what they needed to do, at least, I should say, to start the third period. The whole third period, they were all over them. All over them. At one point, the shots were like, they shot 21 times in the third period. They outshot them 21-8. Overall shots were 46-21. I think it was like 43-18 at one point. They were unbelievably on top of them.
It's the first time in over 5 periods the Red Wings really showed life. Like, they weren't bad the first 2 periods of this game, but given the circumstances of what these 2 games meant, like, how do you not come out first period of first game with your hair on fire? It took a long time for them to understand the intensity of the situation. I get it. Injuries, tired. We didn't even mention with Larkin. Looks like the lack of a break with the Four Nations might be catching up to him, but better late than never. But yeah, it was a hell of a push.
The Red Wings started scoring in their comeback 3 minutes and 30 seconds into the third. Patrick Kane, with time, sits at the top of the circles pretty much, fires home his 15th of the season. Edvinsson, primary assist there. Johansson with the secondary. And then Alex Debrincat with the equivalent of like a fadeaway jumper ties the game. It was an electric moment for the Red Wings where they were, shooting. You were wondering if they were going to break through Merzlikins. And he just turns around, fires one home, perfectly placed shot, like sniped it as much as you can on a turnaround shot in the NHL. 29th of the season, tied 3-3. And at that point, Red Wings fans were feeling confident because, again, they were all over them. Outdoor game, I'll give them grace for the first period, first bit there. Like, it's hard in an outdoor game. It's hits hurt. It's clunky. The ice isn't great. It's a different atmosphere, sure, but also Brad's right. There's massive connotations in context to this game. Tie game, you're feeling good. And then a minute and 7 seconds later, I don't even know how to describe the multitude of things that went wrong on that play. I think McLellan said after the game, like, that shouldn't even have happened. You have 2 defensemen back. You shouldn't even have been in that situation. So missed call aside, should not have gone down like that. And I don't think he's wrong. I think multiple times this game, and especially the past few games, too many Red Wings, and Edvinsson and Johansson have been at the forefront of a lot of them, have been weak on their sticks, weak on the body. They've been getting beat. Too many pucks in tight that, players are able to get a stick on that went in the net. And in this play, I mean, Edvinsson did get his kind of foot kicked out as those 2 guys were colliding. Sticks went up in the air, and he took a high stick, dragged across his face by Danforth, picks up the puck, shoots it, gets the rebound, bangs it home, and the Jackets go up just a minute after the Red Wings tied it. They end up scoring on the empty net, thanks to a play where Lucas Raymond made a terrible pass coming into the zone, and that was all she wrote. Just sucked the life out of the Red Wings comeback, and there was a missed call when the high stick wasn't called, and there's also the Red Wings played terribly in that little moment. I don't know. It was just a cacophony of stupid all around.
Not a banner day for the NHL with the broadcast and then that missed call. This is our penance for We gave it to the refs pretty good last episode.
Oh, so this is karma.
This has been a bad week for the refs, right? The Zegras hit was last Sunday.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm putting a lot. Yeah.
We were talking about the Zegras hit relative to the Cizikas hit. Laid into him pretty good, and now we're sitting here with, like, how is this not the worst missed call of the season? A high stick to the face, 2 minutes left, big stage.
Looking right at it. It's part of the play.
Leads directly to the winning goal.
Refs and linesmen should be mostly aware of it. The lead ref in the Detroit zone was looking right at the play occurring. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
And there's a little break in the recording here. Brad did his best.
Purple-hearted effort for sure.
With sorrow in his eyes, he looked at us like, I don't know if I can make it much longer, guys. We told him to take the drive home, although there is a 0% chance that that's a straight shot.
Godspeed.
Poor guy. Okay, back to the game. Again, I called out, like, the play itself, Edvinsson and Johansson would want that back. I think largely that game, the last little while, moments here and there, but that play specifically, McLellan's right. You want that back. That kind of thing can't happen on that play. From Edvinsson and the defending overall to how Talbot let it in, absolutely. But I think two things are true here. The Red Wings were robbed of a point on that play. Plain and simple. Whether or not you think it should have been a goal that Talbot let in, or whether or not you think Edvinsson should have been stronger on his stick or whatever it was, I do think that as they collided, Danforth kind of incidentally or not kicked out Edvinson's leg, which is why he went spinning like that a little bit. But it's the clearest high stick you're going to see. Fully agree with both of you. It is a terrible missed call, and it's just so annoying because I don't want to sit here and complain about the referees again. But it took a point off the board for the Red Wings in their most consequential game of the season, one of the two of them so far. And we saw what 1 point means last season. And now you have to watch that happen. McLellan did it the right way. You can't sit there and gripe about it. It's not his job. He needs his team to focus in different ways. They fell short in a lot of other ways for sure, but they also didn't in the third period, right? Like, they were doing what they needed to do. I don't know, man. It just infuriates you. It just does.
Yeah, you certainly can't let one moment in the game be the deciding factor of the game, because you probably haven't done enough to win said game if one thing like that goes egregiously against you and ultimately seals your fate. But I totally agree. Like, if this is going to be the National Hockey League, the best league in the world, the officiating standards need to be a lot higher. And like you said, Red Wings fans know what a point means. And this isn't just an ordinary point. This is a point against the team you're directly in competition with to make the playoffs. This is a 4-point game. The night before was also a 4-point game. So yeah, it's 1 point on the standings, but it means a lot more, and especially to Wings fans who, like I said, they know what those points mean when it comes to Game 82.
And I can't emphasize enough, like, there's going to be a lot of people who have been correctly saying, well, then the Red Wings need to be harder on bodies in front of the net so power plays don't fire one home so easily. So the Red Wings need to win battles better. The Red Wings need to start games on time. And all of that's true, and that's what we talk about on the show. And sometimes we tweet or do whatever online as well. Like, that's all part of it. Talbot needed to be better that game. He just wasn't. The two most important goals were, honestly, they should not have gone in. They were stinkers. All that true. But this is the wild card. This isn't the Florida Panthers. This isn't the Dallas Stars. Like, this isn't the Winnipeg Jets this season. These teams are going to be imperfect. And to that point in the game, the Red Wings did what they needed to do to make the game tied. They should have had a power play for the last couple of minutes of the game. And instead they got scored on and, other mistakes that led to the empty net goal. But still, at that point, what's going to turn around again? Of all ways to lose, that's the most, it's so stupid.
Puts a real damper on what that whole game had been. It just leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth if that's how that game ends, whether you're a Red Wings fan, a Columbus fan, or just a hockey fan in general. It kind of sucked.
Other aspects of that game, too, that I think, not positive here, but Elmer Soderblom took a hard kind of head-to-head collision, again, with Danforth. My personal opinion on that one is that's just unfortunate collision. I know there's some folks who think that you don't have to be responsible for your body contact, but I think in a bang bang play like that, like Soderblom's a big guy. I just didn't see anything from Danforth that said he went in trying to do that or he went in irresponsibly. But head-to-head contact and Soderblom was down for a while.
Yeah, I didn't really think much of it either, right? There was no maliciousness to the act. It kind of just looked like a play for the puck. Soderblom obviously got the worst of the blow, and it sucks for him. Yeah, I didn't think much of that.
And if they're down Soderblom now, like this team, this offense looks like it can't figure itself out after losing Kopp and Rasmussen. And I mean, no disrespect to those guys, but if losing Kopp and Rasmussen is enough to put the offense out of sorts, then it's a house of cards, right? We knew that coming into the year. And if you lose Soderblom too, who's been doing quite well, it's going to be tough. You have options down in Grand Rapids, but it's going to be tough to find chemistry again.
Yeah, that's the biggest loss, is that the known chemistry that those guys have been providing into the lineup. You don't know what you're going to get if you call Snively or Austin Watson up to the
Dries is up right now. Just sitting,
Sheldon Dries gets into the lineup. You just don't know what you're going to get, and you can't hitch your horse to those guys riding the ship for the Detroit Red Wings. That's unfair to them and certainly unrealistic expectations for the team as well. So the Red Wings are in a spot right now with the trade deadline looming. There's going to need to be some serious decisions made over the next little bit here to figure out what the path of this team is.
So that's a great point to talk about where they are in the standings. So 2 regulation losses. I mentioned last episode when it was just Brad and I, and the Red Wings and the Blue Jackets on regulation wins, which would be the first tiebreaker, they're tied at 22. So you never want to drop 2 games to a wild card foe in regulation back-to-back period. But if you're going to do it to any of them, the Blue Jackets were the one to do it to, because now they're just tied on that regulation win. They're ahead by 2 points, same games played, so they have the first wild card. Detroit has the second. Behind Detroit, you have Ottawa and Boston at 64 points. Ottawa with 1 game in hand on Detroit, 59 games played. Boston actually has played 1 more game than Detroit. Montreal is at 63 points. The Rangers are at 62 points. The Flyers are at 62 points. And the Islanders are at 61 points. There's a lot of teams where I'm looking at them and they're kind of in the position Detroit was in not long ago, where I was like, there's just too many teams to overcome to say you're a real contender, but it's so tightly packed.
All it takes is one good week, or some teams to have one bad week at this point. Like, with how packed these teams are, it's anybody's race. And given the strength, or maybe I should say lack of strength, of some of these teams, there's no certainty that any of these teams are definitively in or out of the playoffs at this point.
This week, you have the Carolina Hurricanes at home, the Utahs at home, and then on trade deadline day on the road, the Washington Capitals. Terrible test. But by then, the trade deadline has come and gone, so that's, one thing. But after that, Ottawa, that's a huge game. Buffalo, not the same context. Carolina again. Vegas, Washington again. Vegas, Utah, Colorado, Ottawa, Boston. Like, there are either huge games or some really tough ones. It's by no means like impossible, but it's not a cakewalk. So trade deadline aside, we'll talk about that in a second. If the Red Wings want to stay in this race, it's not like they're a mile out of it. They're still technically in a playoff spot right now as we speak. But you have to turn these little trends around. The goaltending has to show back up. The defense has to kind of re-solidify itself a little bit. Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, if they're fighting something, if they're gassed, whatever it is, we've seen this offense struggles mostly when they're not showing up. You can't rely on Debrincat scoring forever. There needs to be a little bit of a gut check, turn the momentum around, because things don't get easier from here on out.
Yeah, this team, if they play 500, that's the bare minimum right now. They need to scrape together some wins against the Vegases, against the Floridas, against the good teams in this league to, separate themselves from the teams chasing them. And yeah, like you said, it can't fall on 2 guys to carry the load. It can't be reliant on the power play itself. It's going to rely on some of the meat and potatoes guys. We're going to need to see more from JT Compher as well. and we're going to need the goaltending to come back to average at the minimum for them to stay in this race. So there's no free games anymore for the Red Wings, especially when they play the teams that are in the hunt with them, like Boston, like Montreal again, who I thought were out of this and now are back in it again. So the Red Wings can't take a game off at this point. You know, if they lose to Vegas, lose to the Floridas, whatever, they certainly could use to win some of those, but they got to beat the teams around them. Losing those 2 games to Columbus has really upped the pressure on them.
The question that everyone is asking now, some people are passionately in the camp of these are just like the Ottawa games, and now Yzerman might move to sell. And some people are saying they're different. I know Brad, unfortunately, is fighting his own demons right now, so he's not here to fight me on this. I was going to come in and say, like, points wise, yeah, absolutely. It's a 2 points, sure, but it's really a 4-point swing every game. So 2 times that 8-point swing, like you said, Evan. It's the same result as the Ottawa games. Where I differ is that Ottawa didn't just win and win by a lot. Ottawa came in and played playoff style hockey, and the Red Wings didn't.
They snatched the Red Wings' souls from their bodies.
Yeah, and they embarrassed them. They punked them. They made them look stupid. You had Brady Tkachuk, I think, literally flexing on guys. Like, it was an embarrassment, and it showed that the Red Wings were not ready for the playoffs that year. And then say goodbye to Bertuzzi and Hronek, and we've seen the steps that this team has taken since then. But, you know, that was a massive turning point. Yzerman will say whatever publicly, but had they won those games in decisive fashion the way Ottawa did, I don't think you're seeing the exact same moves.
Agreed.
2 years later, yeah, they lost to Columbus. The first game was bad, but it's not like I felt like Detroit beat themselves. I don't think Columbus played this incredible, physically dominant playoff style hockey game. I think they played well, but not like Ottawa did to Detroit 2 years ago. In this game, I think Detroit, on balance, you can pick out the mistakes as we do because we nitpick, but I think they were the better team, and especially how dominant offensively they were in the third. I don't think this is the same kind of defeat in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. The outdoor game, I thought the Red Wings, from start to finish, you know, netted out as the better team in that game. I think the mistakes they made were catastrophic, which led to their loss. And then obviously without Cam Talbot having a good game, it made it difficult to win. The first game at home against Columbus, you know, I didn't think Columbus is the greatest team, but the Red Wings laid an egg and did not have a good game. So yeah, I think I understand the similarities that people are drawing, but the context certainly is not the same to me. But I can get on board with what people are saying when they draw the parallels between the Columbus games and the Ottawa games.
Here's where I do agree. One, the proximity to the trade deadline, like that is absolutely, because you have 2 games here. The trade deadline's on Friday, March 7th. You have a couple games here. You play on Friday night where you have to decide what you want to do if you're making any decisions based on this. But where I agree is that this team isn't, as it's made up right now, one that you have to make a push to improve because they are going to do something in the playoffs. A fully healthy Red Wings, I think, could surprise us all with what they do. And I don't know if that's a couple games or stealing around or whatever, but this team still isn't a true playoff contender, right?
Agreed.
The wild card is wide open the last few years. I think that's just the nature of it in this phase of the NHL. So fewer teams than we're used to look like true playoff contenders, but this isn't like I look at this and I'm like, if Kopp and Rasmussen being out sink you, you're not a team that's really
exactly
ready.
Yeah, and I don't come away from the 2 games against Columbus like I did with the 2 games against Ottawa, where I was saying Ottawa's definitively a better team than Detroit. They proved it by results, and they proved it by just beating the Red Wings mentally and physically. This weekend, I had mixed opinions. I still don't think Columbus is all that good of a team. If I had to pick a team to make the playoffs right now, I'd still say Detroit on balance is a better team than Columbus. So yeah, I don't feel like all is lost like some people do, drawing the comparisons to the Ottawa games. I think if the Red Wings were healthy, things would be looking a lot better, but you know, you can only play the cards that you got. So we'll see. I think the Red Wings still have a chance, but it's going to be very, very difficult going forward.
So, in your mind, what does this do for the trade deadline strategy if you're Steve Yzerman, if anything?
You know what? Maybe you try to make moves around the perimeter, bring in some additional depth, identifying where you believe are the biggest holes on this team, whether that be bringing in. It's going to be hard to find a scoring second line player to solidify some of the goal scoring that you're missing right now with Cop out. Maybe you bring in a week ago I would have said you look at a guy like David Savard. He's a pending UFA. He plays that meat and potatoes game. He costs $3.5 million, but I don't think Montreal's letting go of him now that they're kind of sniffing around the hunt again. I don't think the Red Wings make a big splash unless something comes out of nowhere. I think it's all about moving around in the margins, and I do think Steve Yzerman should reward this group for getting to where they are right now. Like, they've really turned this season around. They've proven that they can win games against better teams in this league. It would be nice to see them bolster the lineup a little bit.
The boring answer is yeah. I think you're only really going to make a move if it makes sense beyond this season.
Yep.
Now, I was getting to the point when they were winning all these games. I'm like, whether or not they're going to stay on the streak, they've gotten themselves into a position where with a couple depth moves that might not cost you a ton, you can maybe buy yourself a point or two in the standings. And whether that's I'm thinking of the position Justin Holl is playing and missing Jeff Petrie. And again, I've repeated myself here, but I know that sounds crazy, but the Red Wings would sure prefer a healthy Petrie compared to what they've been doing in their depth defensive role right now. If you can get someone to and this is a rich statement, but bolster the center depth, even if it is just depth, that is extremely difficult. But if there's something out there, I'd pay a middling cost, even if there's no guarantee that they sign, just because if it gets you into the playoffs, it's so valuable. If you play 5 games, these playoffs, that's so valuable. Even if you get swept, you at least get the guys there. You get Seider there. You get Raymond there. Larkin understands what it's like to be there as a captain. Like, it's valuable.
And that's why I think it should come as a reward to these players, because the season up until Christmas was a complete disaster, and they have somehow turned around the negative vibes and the rot that team had, and they've propelled themselves into a wild card spot right now. Steve Yzerman, in my opinion, should go out, try and find the appropriate target, and reward the guys for making the push that they have so far.
Do you still say that if they lose these next 2 games as well?
Well, that might change. I don't
Brad's
want
not here to field the hard answers anymore.
I know. And you shouldn't make those decisions on 2 games to determine the remainder of the season post trade deadline. I think I feel strongly enough in this team that they could make the playoffs that I make non-significant moves that don't cost you a fortune, but make this team better in the short term. It doesn't hinder you in the long term. And, you throw your hat in and see where this team nets out for the end of the season.
See, I'm kind of now towards, I actually was getting towards where you're at, where I'm like, even if you think this guy might not be here in 2025, 2026, go out there and reward the guys. But it's not just the losses. I'm thinking about the injuries too. And I can't believe I'm saying this compared to what I thought, a year or 2 ago. But losing Andrew Kopp, and he's out for the season, he's not coming back. Like, are you going to be able to re-find and regain your chemistry up front? If that's not going to return, then I'm not thinking what's the point, but I'm thinking that might put them outside of the level of play that they need to with a tough schedule coming up. So I'm not fully off that. Like, if they go out and do what you just said, I think I'll be happy in the end. This is in a hypothetical ideal world where you're not overpaying. I'm not going out and shipping a first round pick out. I'm probably thinking pretty hard about a second round pick. And beyond that, you do have a good amount of, depth prospects or decent prospects. But honestly, what I focus on, and circling back, I think this is the boring answer that's just always true, whether it's October or March or the offseason. You make the big move. If it's there, that's a long-term move. If you're a big, Cousins guy, if you're a big, as Evan certainly is, expensive Elias Pettersson guy, for the record.
Sorry, I'm only looking at goal scorers right now, so Matt Rempe is actually my target.
I saw this shift that Pettersson played, is circling. It was almost like Pierre-Luc Dubois, that one shift he was in Columbus for, where it was just like a passenger doing some cardio out there. So it's not good right now.
Just when you think you've hit rock bottom in this situation, the floor continues to just fall out.
Yeah. So maybe not him, but a big splash that'll help you long term. Absolutely, that's a priority. And we know that is like single-digit percentage at best in the NHL at any given moment. I'm honestly thinking, like, are there teams going to call about Alex Lyon? Like, Florida just got rid of Spencer Knight. Are they going to call about Alex Lyon? Or maybe they call about Talbot. Who knows? Our team's going to call about anyone else. It's not like this is the Red Wings selling off roster of the past, but if you're able to ship out a contract like a Tarasenko or a Holl, you absolutely do that. So really, I think the most likely and most sensible answer is that this team is what it is. And if something comes up short term, you just can't pay a premium to do it, because I don't think they're positioned well enough in terms of health and their current play to justify it. If you want to mess around with a middling return for the other team, be it picks or prospects, or you find a way to move out a bad contract in the process, by all means, go for it. Sure. Why not? You come out negative in the trade, but it's not so black and white, whatever. But I'm not forcing that in my mind. I think you just have to kind of accept for large parts that what you have is what you have. It was working a couple weeks ago. It was working a week ago.
Yeah.
And you have to try to regain that even without Copp.
It's really difficult right now to determine where the trade market's at, because so many teams are hanging around that wild card spot, not only in the East, but in the West as well. Like Calgary is a point out, St. Louis is a point out, Utah's 2 points out. That really limits the number of potential trade partners you have, and all the other teams might be looking to add as well. So, supply is low, demand could be high. It could end up being a bad trade deadline to make a move, because it might cost those middling teams too much to move up in the standings. This might be the trade deadline where the rich get richer, which would be fine with me if the Red Wings stay out of.
Maybe not the answer everyone else wanted to hear, but I think if you asked Steve Yzerman and you somehow got him to tell the truth ever, he would probably say, yeah, it's the same as it was before. We certainly want to win those 2 games, but just based on what's out there, we're going to do what's best for this team with a long-term vision.
Yeah.
All right, more on the Red Wings, but first, a word from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. You know how it is. When you're on a tight schedule, grabbing fast food might seem like the only option. But let's be real. Most fast food isn't exactly helping you hit your health goals. That's why we've been using Tempo. Tempo makes it easy to get a high-protein, chef-crafted meal on the table in just 3 minutes. So we can eat well without compromising our much-needed trade deadline episode recording time or our nutrition. Tempo is a weekly delivery service that brings fresh, dietitian-approved meals straight to your door. Their single-serving meals are designed to be fast, feel good, and delicious, with over 20 options to choose from every week. Whether you're looking for calorie-conscious, carb-conscious, fiber-rich, or protein-packed meals, Tempo's got something for you. We went for the protein ourselves, and we loved the spinach artichoke chicken with farro and the sweet and tangy chicken. For a limited time, Tempo is offering our listeners 60% off your first box. Just go to tempomeals.com/wingedwheel to grab this deal. That's tempomeals.com/wingedwheel for 60% off your first box. tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. Rules and restrictions may apply. Welcome back. More on the Red Wings. That was a lot of pretty wet blanket tone.
I didn't really want it to net out that way, but it feels very touch and go right now.
It's like, how do you look at the trade deadline ahead and where you are in the standings? Like, the Red Wings are still in the playoff spot, but you just lost twice in the most important games of the year. One of them you played terrible. One of them you actually were the better team, but you
still lost.
Robbed of a point in like such disgusting fashion. And then you still are like, yeah, but the goal shouldn't have gone in. It just, everyone in that moment sucked. It's like Am I the asshole on Reddit? There's one of the answers is everyone sucks here.
Yeah.
That's from the blue line in. It was everyone sucks here.
Yeah. I think it would be a little disingenuous of us to come in after 2 losses to at a very critical juncture of the season and say the Red Wings should absolutely be buying and they should be trading for whoever is the number 1 player on the trade board right now. I don't know. Whoever that might be. Yeah,
they should trade for Rantanen.
Yeah,
maybe rental wise.
Maybe we should edit the pod and change our answer.
Yeah, put Rantanen in there. I mean, that's like the permanent answer. If Rantanen, if
we're bad, we should get Rantanen so that we're good. If we're good, we should get Rantanen so that we're even better.
Congratulations, you are now qualified to be an NHL GM. Oh, Brad's not here, so I can make fun of him. One of the funniest YouTube comments I saw recently was someone after like 2 episodes ago was like, "Hey, Brad, what's your opinion on Mitch Marner?" Yeah, he ducked out of this one before he could bring him up. So for any of you who are tired of that, there you go. Positive storyline for the Red Wings, though, and we mentioned it earlier. Alex Debrincat. He, for everything that's gone up and down this year and has been hot or cold, or guys who have looked, themselves and not themselves, Alex Debrincat has just been steady, great for the Red Wings all year. 9-game point streak, tons of scoring in there. I think 14 or so points. He's on a 40-goal pace right now. This is the Alex Debrincat that the Red Wings signed up for when they got him.
Yeah, he's, those guys who just kind of, the puck just seems to always go in for them. And it's just, doesn't seem like there's any definitive reason why. They're just maybe always in the right spot or the right time, or they always find a way to score. That is Alex Debrincat to a T.
Mm.
He looks so different this year compared to last. He looks so confident with his line mates. He's making plays. I think his playmaking is super underrated. He's just everything and more than what I expected of Alex Debrincat coming into his first, true full season with the Red Wings.
I like what you said too. Like the puck seems to find him. He gets to the right areas. Like he's not just a perimeter player who's purely trying to snipe it. If you're that guy, you're going to have long, long cold streaks. He's getting into the dirty areas, the areas that the Red Wings have actually seen themselves get scored on a lot over the years and a little bit recently. He can score with talent. He can score by grinding it out. He can score by getting his stick in the right place. He plays with an edge. Like I think he's a feisty player. The same way we talk about Lucas Raymond. Don't be fooled by size. He'll get into scrums. He'll throw a hit. He'll stand up for his teammates. I think he doesn't back off of board battles and he gets in there. Like I love the game I've seen from Alex Debrincat, and this is him playing second line hockey.
Yeah,
he's not getting top deployment, and to me, that has saved the Red Wings' skin in moments here and there. And it's probably, the nuclear offense on the power play, sure. But even at the lowest points of 5-on-5 offense, you're still looking at Alex Debrincat. Like most of the time he's out there and he's one of the guys providing that spark.
Yeah. I think we probably undersold him when he joined the Red Wings as this, singular elite goal scorer. If he's not scoring, he's not doing much else. I think his game has just expanded so much in his time with the Red Wings right now, and he's one of the best players on the team. And if he wasn't scoring right now, this team would be in an absolute dark spot. He is one of maybe the shining part of this team right now.
Hope he continues that. It's nice to have Ottawa Senators fans not come in for a chorus of, "Oh, where's Debrincat? He did the same thing with us." It's like, no, this has been the Debrincat. Just take a season, get acclimated to a new team. No one was really thriving offensively in the previous coaching structure regardless. So, but good for him. You hope to continue to see it. So that's Alex Debrincat. Again, I'll look forward at what the Red Wings have. They have Carolina on Tuesday. We're going to be back with you on Wednesday for the trade deadline preview. On Thursday, they have Utah at home at 7 Eastern. On Friday, 7 Eastern, on the road, they have the Washington Capitals. You may hear from us on Friday. It's our annual, if they're just trading,
spare parts for mid-round picks, smell you later.
I could not get a stage hook long enough to bring Evan to my house into the recording studio. But If something happens, we're going to be with you for an emergency episode post-trade deadline on Friday the 7th. Otherwise, you're going to hear from Brad and Evan on Sunday the 9th to recap everything that happened over the trade deadline. But we'll see what happens as Steve Yzerman tinkers with his approach. Still, the trade deadline preview coming on Wednesday. Across the NHL, as we get into league news now, big trade. Seth Jones, as quickly as he seemed to come up and complain publicly to the media a couple times about the Chicago Blackhawks and everything, and I was like, yeah, that's a sign that that's about to be over. The Blackhawks, I thought, did an interesting job of moving him out. They retained $2.5 million for 5 years, which is a lot of money, a lot of retention. But in return from the Florida Panthers, they get a first-round pick and Spencer Knight, the 23-year-old goaltender. Now, the first-round pick has a condition. It can be a 2026 or a 2027, depending on when it's available, but they still get what's likely to be a late first and a goalie in a position that they were actually very much in need for. And they moved Seth Jones off the team and all but $2.5 million of his money. What do you think?
That's a big move. And I know Seth Jones, people have never been lower on him. Obviously, his contract was bad the day it was signed. It was, too much money and not enough return on value. But man, if there's anyone who's going to go into Florida, play middle pairing defense, and it could thrive, it's going to be him. He played a ton of minutes every night for Chicago. Like, he was 24 minutes a night average, and he actually had solid counting stats. So if he can get insulated on the Panthers team, and that team plays incredible team defense, this could be a great move. And I think if Florida makes the finals and or wins the cup, they're not going to care about retention or what that first round pick ends up being, or how much they have to continue paying Seth Jones, because they're going to all continue to be in the conversation of cup contenders.
Yeah, it's like the Bobrovsky contract, right? Like, you win once and you don't care.
No.
You don't win that cup without Bob, so you don't care about the $10 million you're paying him.
And $7 million in even next year. By the end of that contract, $7 million could be what an average second liner makes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think by how the cap is going up, that's going to be what it costs to be a second pair guy. And especially, you're not paying him to be the guy, right?
No.
To me, the cap's going up. You just put Tkachuk on LTIR. That's almost $9 million of money on LTIR or something like that. You have, I don't know Ekblad's future on that team. I'm not really inspired to think they're interested in paying him a ton of money. This could go poorly. Seth Jones could just be not good wherever he goes. I'm personally very low on Seth Jones, especially in the context of how he was on Chicago, or how he theoretically would be if Detroit had traded for him. But like you said, there's probably no better situation in the league for a guy like Seth Jones than Florida. So to me, this could be a rare win-win off the hop.
Yeah. Seth Jones will find success when he's not on an island being the number one D guy. He's kind of like, I'm not even sure if it's exactly 1-to-1 here, but he's kind of like the Taylor Halls. Taylor Hall didn't want to be the number one guy on the teams he went to. He didn't want to be the guy the New Jersey Devils were relying on night in and night out. He just wanted to be somewhere in the second or third line, doing his thing and producing. And I think with Seth Jones going to a true cup contender like the Florida Panthers, he can kind of just do his thing. They can play him big minutes, help take the load off some of their top guys, and he doesn't need to be a Norris caliber defenseman there. They just need him to play steady two-way hockey and chip in offensively when the time requires. Like, he doesn't need to be great. He just needs to be a better version of Seth Jones than what we've seen over the past few years.
Doesn't just earn himself, one of the best facilities and the best teams in the NHL, amazing weather, but also a 5% increase almost, as he went from pretty low state income tax rate to a 0 state income tax rate. So he's got to be happy.
Weather will be nice. I don't know if he's a big golfer, but you can't go wrong in Florida when it comes to golf.
I heard there's some good players out there.
I've also heard that. I've never seen any of them. So
you're not watching TGL?
No, I'm not. But yeah, like you said, I think this is really a win-win for both teams. I think player and franchise, Chicago, wanted to move on from this, just cut ties, make sure it wasn't going to be a complete anchor in terms of a trade coming back for Chicago. I think everybody's happy that this is now resolved.
Now, moving on to the other trades that happened, not as big, but Gus Nyquist was a guy that I was like, maybe Detroit could take a look at Gus Nyquist if they were feeling aggressive. Well, the Minnesota Wild get Gus Nyquist in exchange for a second-round pick. Nashville retained just a shade under $1.6 million on this remaining part of Gus Nyquist's contract, but a second-round pick is the return for Nyquist, 2026 second. Don't hate the deal. I think for the Red Wings, like, you're not going out there and spending a second for a rental, most likely. If you're the Red Wings, you're not going out there and spending a top goalie prospect, or maybe not even a prospect anymore, and a future first for 5 years with Seth Jones. So in the context of Detroit, these deals don't make sense, but that's kind of the going rate for what they were going to move for.
Yeah, Minnesota needed Nashville to retain, so that probably bumped it up to a second. I think a third for Gus Nyquist is probably reasonable. Nobody's had a good year in Nashville. No one seems to be able to score goals, so his counting stats look awful, but I would say there's more there than what meets the eye, and he's a bona fide NHL veteran at this point. It's disgusting how time has passed, and I had to say that.
Guess how old he is. Do it.
45.
He is 35 years old.
That is insane to me. I still remember when he came into the league and torched teams apart, and I thought he was going to be the next cornerstone piece to the Red Wings.
Oh, how naive we were. Another player that I thought the Red Wings would be interested in, and we'll see in the offseason because he's a UFA, but Ryan Lindgren actually moved as part of a deal to Colorado. Larger deal. I won't get into all the minutia of it, but that's a guy who I was like, I was a little bit worried that he would have a ton of attention around him and there would be a bidding war and Detroit would try to trade for him. I don't know how I feel about Ryan Lindgren as a trade deadline piece. I wonder if he's not the kind of profile they're going to look for in the offseason too. So we'll see when it comes to that. But for the trade deadline, at least, no longer on Detroit's radar. A guy who is coming up in league talks, though, JJ Peterka, who I think would be an interesting pickup for anyone in the league. A struggling Buffalo team, absolutely, but Peterka's, he's got a German friend here in Mo Seider, and he's got himself a productive season as well. Through 56 games, he's 17 goals, 28 assists on the Buffalo Sabres. Last year was a 50-point player as well. Like, he's productive. And if you're the Red Wings and you need top six production, Peterka would be a pretty sweet pickup.
It's almost like they should have just drafted him.
Would have loved if they just drafted him. God.
Would have cost a lot less. Would have cost less than a second.
Yeah. Which I wonder what the going rate would be for Peterka, but that's a player who I think would be a smart pickup. It's hard to imagine the price is going to be low for a divisional rival, though.
It's going to be exceptionally high for a division rival. JJ Peterka's gotten better every single year on the Buffalo Sabres, which means if he goes essentially anywhere else in the league, he's going to become a star. Yeah. Am I interested in JJ Peterka? Yes, but it depends on the cost, and I have a bad feeling it's going to be very expensive.
Yeah, that's a lot of value. I think it would be higher, to say the least, than what
it's going to be more than a second-round pick, I'll say that.
Just a bit more. Check your pockets. You look at all this, and you're just like, at some point, whenever I have these discussions, I'm like, I know I sound like a broken record where it's like the smart thing to do is to wait. And if you can get the big deal, you do it, but you don't overpay. And it's like, this team has gotten better and made the smart moves by and large every year. And I have my own qualms with certain contracts or trades here and there, but we took a look on a recent episode, like based on where the Red Wings came from to now, the patient outlook has been the outlook. And it's not like the market is teeming with players that you can go out and pick up that would be worth the cost. But I just wonder if you don't just close your eyes and say, oh, screw it. The cap's going up. Who cares?
Yeah, I don't know if the trade deadline is the time to do it. Obviously, it would get you ahead of the curve for pending UFAs. It gives you a little bit more time to negotiate, gives you a little bit more time to sort of showcase what the Detroit Red Wings, the organization, the city and the state of Michigan are in terms of a hockey state. I think there's certainly value there. I just think if it's going to be a big name player, there's going to be a lot of teams on all of them, and it's going to cost probably more than what you're willing to do. And you can just kind of do this showcasing at the free agency opening day on July 1.
Or you just get expensive Pettersson extremely cheap and take
You'll
a shot
never
with it.
see me again. You'll never see me again.
If Pettersson becomes a Red Wing, you don't know how fast I'm ordering that jersey for you. I don't know what they cost. You were getting a game worn. We're going to get him in studio to sit next to you.
That would be, hey, I have nothing against Elias Pettersson, the person. I'm sure he's a great guy.
Loves to sit in front of a microphone too, famously. So
Yes, yeah. So I don't know what my reaction would be, but
I'd have to find a way to surprise you with it. Just like we'd be talking about the Chiarot hit on Marchenko, and you'd be all lit up and excited about, like, you know, violence in hockey, and you're like, this is why guys like Chiarot are valuable, and you need to be able to make these open ice hits and physical players. And then I'd open this closet door and out would come Elias Pettersson.
that would be great content. That would be great content. But
That
oh
might
my
be when we
God.
actually see you go out the window.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. We are going to take a quick break here to hear from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. And when we're back, the final segment of the show.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, you get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones. We add in bloopers, we let loose, have fun, answer any questions that didn't make the main show. You also get access to any other bonus content that we put out. You get access to our Patreon exclusive Winged Wheel podcast Discord and all the communities in it. Additionally, you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways, and you can sign up for a giveaway where for every Detroit Red Wings home game, we give away 2 tickets directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast for all of that and lots more. Laporta Potty says, can you guys talk about the cap for Kosa and Augustine if they both reach their ceiling?
If they hit their ceiling, what are we looking at?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Kosa was drafted as a project pick, but could turn into someone like Vasilevsky. I would say you'd be looking at a perennial top 5 goalie in the NHL for Sebastian Kosa. I think it's a little hard right now to say where you'd be with Trey Augustine, but he's the best goalie in college hockey right now.
You want another small dominant goalie, UC Saros.
Yeah.
There you go. With goalies, it's kind of like, if you're a strong goalie prospect, your ceiling is one of the top goalies in the league, because the league's not good at predicting them.
They could be absolutely nothing. They could end up being a career journeyman that never really becomes anything more than a league average goalie, or they become a future Hall of Famer, perennial Vezina candidate.
The Danny Man Can says, I was against buying last deadline because our core was still very young, but also because we had such a cushion. Now I think we have to be buyers as the team has earned it and needs the help. So maybe in your camp, Evan.
Yeah, I fully agree with my opinion.
Oh, that's the smart way to phrase it, because I intentionally didn't read the second half of their comment yet.
Uh-oh.
I know Evan hates him, but is this the time to buy low on the expensive Pettersson? Wouldn't a package centered around Danielson and a first be a bargain if he can become a point per game again?
No, absolutely not interested in that at all.
Isn't it amazing how much his stock has dropped where that's like an instant no reaction?
That makes me sick to my stomach. I think Nate Danielson could come into the lineup right now and be more productive and useful than Elias Pettersson.
If you think about what you need to play playoff hockey in the modern NHL, and the way, unless Pettersson's got this like wild injury and he comes back next season completely replenished.
That is not the risk I am personally willing to take.
For that much money and those many.
I just can't imagine, the Red Wings play in the Atlantic. That means they got to go up against some very tough teams. Can you imagine Elias Pettersson having to play in the first round or any round against the Florida Panthers? They would stuff him into a locker.
They would bully him like you're the scrawny kid on the first day of school.
He thought JT Miller was bad. Wait till you meet Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett.
Potato Head says, a day later, the thing more infuriating than the referee missing the high stick is the fact that even if the linesman saw, I think he did, why else would he have huddled up? They aren't allowed to overturn. I wanted to punch my TV when Dave Jackson said just to miss 2-minute minor. Whoops. Oh, well, gee whiz. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's one of those quirks in the rule. The amount of texts I had from friends saying they can't change this, they can't review this. I was like, no, it's not a major, it's not an injury, so they're screwed.
Yeah, it seems like such an obvious thing to be like, well, if it's a penalty, just call it after the fact, and shuffle everything back to when the penalty took place. But you really open up Pandora's box if you make that rule change, because then we're going to get a lot more reviews. It's going to slow down the game even more and make it a terrible fan experience in-house and those watching on TV.
Do we think the NHL changes this rule by next season? I know the language could get tricky, so I'm not hopeful, but I think there's a chance only because it happened in such a pivotal moment.
You know what? It sucks as Red Wings fans that it happened against us, and we just saw the Zegras Rasmussen incident as well, which retroactively was fixed, but it doesn't change it in the game. Trevor Zegras, a good player, got to finish that game and could have ultimately changed the outcome of that game. I hesitate, without putting extremely deep thought into this, I hesitate to say that would be a good idea.
Berggren's map reading tutor says, I know Fisher and when back Moose have more sandpaper in their game than they've shown. Is there any chance we keep failing the punk test because our penalty kill is so horrible they don't want to risk an automatic goal for the opponent? Maybe to a degree. There's times where they go out there and say, I can't really engage in this. If you're constantly playing from behind, you're less want to get in the mix like that. But I don't know. I think you're just not seeing that from the team overall.
Yeah, I agree.
By and large. Paul Denow says, how much do you think Four Nations is impacting Raymond and Larkin? Are they gassed in comparison to the guys that had the time off? They're playing great before the tournament, but both looked off, especially Larkin.
I don't think it's nothing. And I think we've seen that across the league with other guys going on LTIR or, day-to-day nursing things. Like, there's a lot of guys coming back pretty banged up. There was a lot of significance to winning that and playing in those games. So I don't blame any players for really buying in. It was a fantastic tournament, but I really don't think there's nothing to that statement. Like, I think the players who are involved in the Four Nations face-off are undeniably more tired right now than their counterparts who didn't.
Yeah, it's complicated. They definitely are, I think the certainties are, they're gassed. Definitely there's some small lingering things that they're either playing through or in Kachuk's case, is out, right? He's on LTIR. I wouldn't be surprised if Larkin at the very least has something that he's working through. The lack of a break that you usually get around this time of a year. But then again, guys came back from break and looked off too. So
yeah, it's
Cancun flu is...
It's not a directly relatable thing, I don't think, but I think there's something to it on a personal player-by-player situation.
Something that you have to kind of prep for if you're a player in a team. But again, for all the conversations we had about it, it's not going to go away now. You're going to have the World Cup. You're going to have the Olympics. It's only going to happen more. So you find a way around it. Mike Caviani says, look, I'm not a finger pointer, but didn't Brad say in the last episode that it's highly unlikely either team walks away from these two games with 0 points? Ryan, you got to start editing those statements in post if you're going to keep using your powers recklessly. Maybe we just leave all the predictive type comments to Lobstradamus, eh?
That's right. Yeah.
That's what happens when you miss an episode, man.
He's trying to fill shoes that, he wasn't qualified to do.
I was telling Brad, I was sitting here and I was telling him, I was like, look, last time you said it and it all fell apart. This time I think you should say it again as a reverse
There's
jinx.
no way it can fall apart again.
This is not going to happen twice, they said. But yeah, I mean, technically though, Brad shouldn't have been wrong. And I think that's why the ref didn't raise his hand for the high sticking penalty. He said, well, Brad said it's highly unlikely and it'd be really funny if I just completely blew this point for the Red Wings.
I truly think that's the only logical explanation to this whole thing happening.
Jay Gollum said, you mentioned these double losses not being a good look for the team's playoff chances. The next 7 out of 10, you could argue 9 out of 10 are against playoff teams. 6 of them are top 10 teams in the league. Predictions? How do these next 10 games go? in terms of what they need to look like to stay in the playoff push, maybe even holding the wild card spot. So their next 10 games: Carolina, Utah, Washington, Ottawa, Buffalo, Carolina, Vegas, Washington, Vegas, Utah. And the 11th game is Colorado. I think you said it right, Evan. You can't be working with less than 500 really. And it's going to depend on what everyone does around you, but there's so many teams in it. Someone's going to seize it if you don't. Like, it's just how the math works. You got to be working with at least 500 in terms of points percentage there at a bare minimum to be in it.
Yeah, I think to stay in the race, they need to be at least 500. How the games actually go, it's so hard to predict right now. I haven't liked how Carolina's looked since they got Mikko Rantanen, which is crazy. So every team's going through it right now. I don't want to say, oh yeah, Washington is absolutely going to beat the brakes off Detroit, because Washington is first in the league in points. Like, every game is completely different. There's context involved in all those. But I think from a playoff picture perspective, the Red Wings have to get at least 10 points out of the possible 20 in the next 10 games.
It's not even Washington that's first anymore. It's Winnipeg, who we should say has been absolutely on fire.
Yeah.
Both teams where people were predicting their downfalls this year.
Yeah. Once again, Connor Hellebuyck continues to be one of the best goalies on the planet.
Mr. Kuzi says, watching Stars continually get beat on away from the play or after the whistles is tiring. I feel like this team continues to fall, in miniature human words, i.e. Brad, the punk test. They consistently get knocked around and can't handle teams that are physical. At what point do we begin to scream for Mr. Watson to be called up? Between Anaheim, Middleton on 71 in Minnesota, and the fighting BJs, it's tiresome and somewhat troubling. Violence might not be the answer, but it's certainly usually effective. Am I off base here? I wouldn't hate to see it. The problem is you have so many needs in your forward group that you have to make sure that whoever you're bringing in can be part of an effective lineup too. So I'm not saying Watson can't be, but can't be just to scrap either.
Yeah, exactly. The Red Wings need someone to come in and also be productive, because you're losing a lot of you're losing production with some of the guys you have out. Your first need is to replace Andrew Kopp, which I don't think you're going to find within the organization, even calling someone up from Grand Rapids. And there aren't a lot of candidates to be called up. Like, yeah, maybe Nate Danielson has earned it, but do you really want to rush that? Carter Mazur's just getting back into the swing of things from injury. Austin Watson kind of is that guy, but he's kind of the heart and soul identity of Grand Rapids right now. But do the Red Wings even care about that if the playoff hopes are really on the line? Like, you got to make the right call. But if you're looking to call someone up, I think Austin Watson would be the only candidate.
I am interested about Mazur. It's such a shame that he missed so much of this year where he was supposed to,
100%.
But I am curious to see what he could potentially do. I wonder if he doesn't come in and we're like, oh yeah, this is exactly the grinder we need. Right?
Yeah, he scored 2 goals, I think, today as well. So he's coming back and getting into form quickly, which is fantastic to see.
Sam Miggs says, time to shake up the first line a bit. I think it's kind of a compliment to Larkin and Razor that people freak out after 3 bad games. So what we were talking about earlier with Larkin is like, you're ready to write the season off. It's a bit soon, but yeah, do you break them up? Do you try to find something else? For a hot minute there, they put Kasper as a center, I believe, between Raymond and Berggren in a previous game. Do you try that again? What do you do?
It's not like the Red Wings have lost production. Like, they're still scoring goals. They just need to tighten up a lot of the other areas of the game. I think if Cam Talbot or Alex Lyon are NHL average any given night, I think they win both those games against Columbus. I think that's more of the pressing need than to shuffle things around. But if you really want to get a spark out of that top line, maybe you bring Debrincat back in there and get them going again.
Yeah, I think you're right. Even with them not looking themselves completely, it's not like they've been shut out,
Yeah.
I think the depth defense is hurting upstream again as the honeymoon period of the defensive combinations has kind of waned. Not that people are god-awful all of a sudden, but it's just not so easy for Johansson anymore. And you're starting to see a little bit of the growing pains of guys very normal for the positions that Edvinsson's in, Johansson's in, and elsewhere.
Yep.
So it's all a big we'll see. But all right, On that, I think we were talking between parts of the show when we were on break there for a second. It's hard to do an episode when you weren't planning to do a 2-man. So appreciate you all hanging in with Evan and I in this one. All the best to Brad, who at best is a quarter of the way home right now with the 15 stops he's had to take.
Yeah, that was probably the worst drive of his life, and it was not weather related.
Hopefully he's back next episode. Otherwise, we'll do a nice little, in memoriam right here for him, with the smallest. I'm just being mean to the guy. He's going through it right now. I'm still
nothing we can say can make him feel worse than he already does.
That's true. All right, we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. Thank you to the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast and to all of our listeners, new and old. Appreciate you tuning in with us, especially as we, change on the fly here, a bit shorthanded. To all of our Patreon supporters, could not do this show without you. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast if you want to support the show. And if you want to support us, but Patreon is not for you, just subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple or Spotify or YouTube or whatever it is. Hit the subscribe button, leave a rating or a thumbs up or a review. All of that helps a lot. Tell a friend about the show. To our name level supporters on Patreon, we appreciate you so much. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Alexander Hansen, Glenn Brabham, C. Lyon, Matthew M. Rice, Adam Rose, Adam Zuiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Anna Sleeman, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Bingo Bango, Carl Brutanen Naluski, CB55, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Grand Rapids Girly, Griffin God Creatives, Hatrick Sandine Pelika, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, a.k.a. Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, Jennifer Morris, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Casper, The Friendly Post, Lunchbox, Mark Hernandez, Marty, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Mike Ludland, Mr. Kuzi, Now I Have to Learn How to Click on a Macintosh, Podgy713, R.A., Roy Donk, Ryan Britt, Sam Bankson, Skeletor, Slim Smitty Cards, Stephen Ortlieb, That's What I Appreciate About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Wings Fan in Chicago, Eyes Plan Stan, General Andy Bohannon, The Cheesebag Army, A.A. Ron, A.B., All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Antonio Gracias, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, Bing Bop, Boom 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 Bop, Bam, C.E. Hayes, Chimkim Nutgits, Chris Felinsky, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsuk Stangleberries, Deep N, Cider, Dylan Larkin Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Johnny Page, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, J.M. Rhapsody, Josh Yelton, Just Missed a 2-minute minor, middle finger emoji, and also Go Blue, Chaotic Monkey, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, Linda Hull, Lonnie Zone, Lucas Raymond, Mitch Minier, Noted Soderblom Worshipper, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Reed, Ryan M, Sam, Migs, new name level supporter, welcome Sam to the Dub Club, Sandy P, Right Hand D, Steven, that other guy, thank you so much to that other guy, by the way, for the ticket fundraising this weekend, the Hodag, the Hat123, Trent Thorough, Wings Fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll see you for the trade deadline preview.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.